Okay. Hi, everybody. Sorry for a little delay there. Koolbit, so thank you for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here. It's always good to come to YetiZen. I just want to talk a little bit about IP and how we're dealing with IP. But before that, just a little bit on Koolbit. We are building what we think of as the biggest mobile casino network in the world. We already have 4 casinos, 3 different platforms, 5 different versions. We now have the technology to print apps instantly across multiple platforms. So last Friday we launched a new casino and upgraded all the others. All done.
Show the names.
All done instantly. We also launched today in the UK. That's under the Casino Eno brand. We launched today in the UK our first foray into sports betting. So we're now taking bets in the UK for real money on real money events, and we're launching a couple of casinos in the UK for real money in the coming 6 to 8 weeks.
You said a couple of casinos, physical?
Virtual, real money, real money. No, what do you think about those casinos, sir? I mean, we are a casino operator that happens to be online or in the social world. We care much more about the overall end-to-end user experience than the nitty-gritty details of an individual slot machine. We care about the slots, but slots come and go. In a casino, they come and go in our real money and virtual.
Is it all mobile or mobile and online?
So we started off as mobile. We know mobile better than we know anything else, and today we just went online. So in the UK, you can go into the iOS App Store to do real money betting. That's very constraining. What about all those people who want to bet with you on a desktop or on their Android devices? So we've gone mobile. We've gone on the web now. Myself, I before starting this company, ran Betfair in the USA. I've been in the US about 20 years. I came here on purpose because it is the technology center. If you want to be doing anything in the world, you've got to be here. And I've done a whole bunch of startups and big companies, always on the cutting edge of technology, focused on the consumer. Look, when the guy said to me, can you tell us something about what it's like to compete when you've got open IP, my immediate thought was poker. Because poker is unbelievable, the changes that have gone on over the last decade or so. And the first thing that's really very interesting, not just the virtual currency side, is whoever is first with a decent product lasts a long time. So Zynga was first on Facebook with their poker product. They're still there. They're still number one. I remember being at Betfair and going back to our management and board meeting saying, Facebook's now hit 100 million users, and poker has now got 3 million. 150, 5, 200, and it just, we watched it climb and climb. I don't know the number today, I didn't check, but they hit 50 million monthly users at their peak. Pokerist was the first iOS poker app. I think they've now been overtaken by Zynga. Zynga has worked really hard to do that, spent a huge amount of money. Pokerist is still doing fine. Dragonplay was number one, the first onto Android. They got onto Android 4 years ago. I can't imagine how bad that app looked, but they were number one, and they were first on the new platform. So what's interesting to me is lesson one is just get on the new platform, get in there, and just get that game out there with a generic name if you'll start to be successful. So first. Then the second thing to do is to break the law. Now, I'm not encouraging anyone to do it because it really is very dangerous. Full Tilt is now, doesn't exist anymore, it's now a division of PokerStars. People went to jail, they got fined incredible amounts. PokerStars has settled with the DOJ in the USA after breaking the law, or allegedly breaking the law, but they settled and paid many hundreds of millions of dollars of fines. And they still are in deep trouble with each of the individual states' attorney generals, because they haven't settled on a state-by-state basis yet. So here they are trying to come into do real money poker in the US with a rough background. But these guys, what they did back in 2001, 2002, the leader on real money poker in the US was Paradise Poker. They were based out of the Caribbean somewhere, and they were doing great, and they were really scared about going on TV and shouting about what they were doing. These guys weren't scared. They had the .NET strategy, if you remember, all of that, where everywhere you looked there was a .NET advertisement to go and play poker on the .NET website. And they hit the .NET website and the game was kind of a bit crippled, and you were encouraged to go to the .com to spend your money. So I think it was really fascinating that they crushed Paradise, who were more legal, and who gave up when the laws became clear, and yet these guys are now paid a huge amount for their leadership in that. The other fantastic thing, I do have to say, I do have a lot of respect for the guys at Full Tilt Poker Stars, and they've done a lot to try and clean up their act. And one of the most fantastic things they did was introduce Rush Poker. Do any of you guys know what that is? So normally you go to a casino or you go to a typical online site, including the virtual currency world. You sit at the table, and the best strategy for playing poker is to fold something like 80% of the time. That's pretty boring. It takes a lot of discipline and just folding and folding. The pros on the real money sites end up with 5, 10, 15, or our Betfair pro was able to play with 20 different tables. And she would just, when a hand got interesting, she would then just fold everything else and focus on that one table. So these guys came up with a different idea. Fold, move to a brand new table, and play with new people all the time. And so literally, you can play a hand every 4 to 6 seconds, and just keep going and going and going. And then what happens is, because everyone's playing the same strategy, which is, wait till my cards are good, wait till my cards are good, everyone's got great hands, so everyone's betting really big. So now they've got much bigger rake and much bigger revenue. It's a wonderful game. The players love it, the companies love it. Huge innovation without changing the rules of the game itself, just how they deliver it to the players. And I love what those guys have done. I made this slide on the plane. So out of all of these guys, if I was thinking about poker, I mean, if I really wanted a bad boy casino and the image of some guy, I think Charlie Sheen would be okay. Probably better than Pee Wee Herman. The World Series of Poker has now been used by multiple companies. It was used, I think it was Glue First did a game under that brand. EA's done a game. EA's just sold that game back to Caesars, and Caesars now going to run that game. I think it's fascinating how much trouble anyone has had monetizing the biggest name in poker in a poker game. It just hasn't worked anyway. And then, of course, nobody's tried to use casino yet. Kenny Rogers, no one hold them, no one fold them. I mean, there's so much IP out there that one could use to enhance an open IP game, and yet it's really tough. Rounders, yeah. But it's really hard. I mean, the way we think about our business, obviously we want to make revenue. But to be able to get revenue, we have to get people to come back again and again and really enjoy the game. To be able to get people to come back, they've got to come once. And so if you think about awareness and trial, having a great piece of IP will help. So if you walk into a casino and you see a slot machine for Sex and the City, if you're a fan of Sex and the City, you've got to have a look at it and maybe put in a coin. To get people to come back and put the second dollar in, it's got to be gameplay. And it's not going to be their love of the IP. So the Monopoly game, there were a number of Monopoly slot machines built. One of them had a fantastic in-game bonus buy-in where you could buy houses and buy hotels. Awesome idea. But you could have done that without monopoly. It was the gameplay that made people put extra money in, not the brand itself. And then, and revenue, it's gameplay. People will come and have a look at a great piece of IP. They'll look at the Charlie Sheen poker game, but they won't give you money unless it's great gameplay. So I mean, I think that third-party IP is awesome-ish. I mean, I think it's a fine way to get attraction. It's a fine way to start the relationship with a player. It's not a great way to keep them engaged and actually make money out of them. Just one guy's thought. So as I went through this, I was thinking, well, you know, let's be first. I've always pushed to try and be the first in a category. We did not go after Facebook casino games, trying to be a Facebook slot company, because we were late. The first guys on Facebook started in 2007. When I launched our company in 2011, I was going to be competing against people with 4 years of experience, plus another year at the time we launched. They had huge installed bases. We had to be first at doing something different, so we went mobile. Our names, you know, we can debate whether they really are memorable, but we have really tried to work on our branding and differentiate them. Our distribution strategy, we've done a lot of work to have a differentiated distribution strategy and really find, rather than just go and give the ad networks the $2 and $3 they're all asking for, as if that's the only option in the world. We've dug in and really found little niches where we can get customers at much, much lower cost. And we focused on gameplay. The gameplay is absolutely critical. We do, for retention revenue, spend a lot of time on platform tools. The idea that we've now got a set of casinos where we can just print new ones and literally print an upgrade to all of them instantly and publish it out to all the platforms is incredibly valuable for retention and adding new revenue streams. And we did that from the beginning. You've got to build it from the beginning. There's no point in slapping any of this stuff on top of your game at the end of the day. So with that, I just wanted to tell you why we launched in the UK sports betting. Sports betting in the UK is probably just about the most competitive business anywhere in the world, in any industry that I can think of. It's, the bookies there have got very, very long standing relationships with consumers. I put Paddy Power. Paddy Power's a newcomer compared to Ladbrokes and William Hill. These guys have been at it a long time. They're very trusted. Betfair came along about 12 years ago, and we went after the bookies with a much, much differentiated product. Very complicated, and we went out and actually had a funeral for the bookies. It was very funny to the Betfair team. I wasn't there, but very funny to the Betfair team. 10 years later, I was meeting someone from William Hill, and he was still angry about the funeral for the bookies. And Betfair's done great. They're a public company now. But what Betfair does is we've got a betting exchange where many people bet against many others about the outcome of an event. And the market changes in real time, even before the event has started. So if I think the 49ers are going to win, and then I get information that suggests that the quarterback won't start, I've already got my position placed to win. I now put in a bet against it, and I'm starting to lock in my winnings or losses even before the game has started. Very complicated, very sophisticated, very lucrative. And I compare that to companies like Paddy Power. It's very simple. It's just £10 on Chelsea to win at the weekend. And that's their bread and butter. And we thought there's a way to go in there. And it's just an experiment. We could be completely wrong. It's a very little experiment. But what we've done is we've gone in there with a brand called Bet Baron. And you can play the Baron, which is a pick-3 type game. And then we've got the pick-7, which is a Colossus, called the Colossus. But the bet that we've got a deal or no deal kind of option, where if you start to win, we will start offering you to buy the bet back before it's complete. So you've got 3 legs in a pick-3. Halfway through the first soccer match, we will offer you a certain amount of money if we think the outcome is going to be in your favour. So you bet £2. Halfway through the first match, we'll offer you £5 to buy all the bet back, or £2.50 to buy a portion of it. At the end of the second match, now the bid might be up to £100, and you can stay in and you don't have to sell it because you think you're going to win £1,000. And so this is in between the complexity of Betfair and the simplicity of the old guys. We'll see. I haven't a clue if it'll work, but it's brand new. I mean, I think it will work, but it's brand new. It's a little bit different, and we've got a nice name that we think is a bit memorable, and we've got a new distribution channel that no one has used in the UK before, and we are mobile first, and those guys don't understand mobile as well as we do. So we'll see what happens, but you know, sports betting, very competitive, very undifferentiated in the UK, but I think we found a niche. On the bread and butter of our business, the virtual currency mobile casino, when we launched, we already had two big social casino companies out there on desktop. We had Slotomania and Double Down. Fantastic product, doing really well on Facebook. And we said, we are not going on Facebook. We knew the cost of acquisition was already going through the roof. It was already a legacy platform in 2011. Legacy meaning lots and lots of incumbents. No real differentiation, very hard to break through. And so we went mobile. And we said, we can't even go on mobile and just build one massive app and hope to go head to head with these guys. Because they've got so much money, they will be on iOS and Android. And so what we said was, okay, we'll build a network of apps. We'll bring people into our brand, and then we'll cross-sell them to all the other apps within our brand. And that's what we now have. And you know, it's still early days, but the financials look great. They're growing nicely. And what we've done there, after focusing a lot on the technology, and frankly a pretty ugly brand, not that great, we just rebranded everything about a week ago, 10 days ago. And we're now Casino Eno, we've got 4 different casinos. We're going to launch a 5th and a 6th in the coming weeks. And we've got the goddess Eno in her Temple of Fortune. And we got a little story around it. And the reception so far has been good. And we'll see where that goes. In a hard to differentiate market, that's what we have to do. So just to go back to where I was, the earlier conclusions, got to find a thing to be first in. Try so that you own something that nobody else owns yet. Try and be really memorable about it. Get that distribution channel built in from day one, and then rely on the gameplay, that your unique gameplay, your expertise around managing your players to be able to create a differentiated experience for them. And that was what I wanted to share. I'd be glad to answer any questions and have a discussion. Yeah.
What currencies does your betting platform take?
What currencies? Well, so virtual currency and real money. We on the virtual currency side, we've got our own currency, of course, and we take any payments that Apple or Android will let us take. On the real money side, we are any currency that people want to put their money in. Right now, the site says pounds everywhere, but shortly it will say dollars for non-US. We'll be taking that here, but non-US people have got dollar accounts as well as other currencies globally. We're not taking bitcoins. We'll get to it, but it's not mainstream. So
When you will get to it?
I'm sorry?
When you will get to it?
When Bitcoin is mainstream. It's just not mainstream right now.
Yeah. Like all the cash poker in the US is now Bitcoin based.
Because you can't do it with fiat currency.
Because it's illegal.
Yeah, so all the professional and hardcore poker players around here are playing with Bitcoin. That's why we saw this increase in prices a few months ago in Bitcoin.
Interesting.
So question here.
Hi, I was wondering, is it possible to buy a phone from England and bet here in America? Just, you know, just as
Legally
Is
possible?
that
so-
legality? Can we do that in America?
So it depends. It depends a little bit.
Uh-huh.
So it is not illegal for you living as a resident of California to place a bet in the UK. It is illegal for the operator to take a bet from you as a resident of the USA.
Unless I have a phone permit.
Now the state of Washington is illegal for you as well. So that varies state by state.
Oh, okay.
Now, in the UK, what they will do is they will check for, they don't know your customer laws, so they will check that you're a resident there, that you've got a bank account there, and then they will, on the phone or the desktop, check where you're located. And so, I hope you can't bet on our website. We don't want your money. Okay?
So the compliance issues are all on the operator? Does that increase your compliance costs significantly?
Oh, they're huge.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. Your poker stars, your full tilt broke the law. Come on, man, break the law. You said it was a good example.
I didn't say it's a good example. I said it's an example.
They're all in prison now.
No, actually. They pay a lot of money to
Sure.
Hey, I was curious. This is sort of obliquely related to IP, but it was something you brought up more than once. You mentioned this emphasis on gameplay. And really, a lot of these things are kind of fundamentally the same mechanical gameplay. So when you say it, is that some code word for experience, user experience, or is there actually something added to the mechanics of a traditionally known game?
Thank you. No, I really do mean player experiences. They're going through whatever journey it is you design for them. And maybe you can come up with something like Rush Poker, where you actually, you're still playing No Limit, Hold'em, it's the same game, but they have changed the way that you interact with the game. And I mean, that's just a fantastic experience. And when we've tweaked on the social side, we've got a bunch of things around leveling and bonusing, where, you're still playing slots, so you're hitting spin, but around that experience, we try to build as much as we can to improve the player experience.
Any other questions? Just yell it out.
When do you think you will bring 3D clients to web and mobile versions of your casino? Like, say, Backus or the French 3D casino?
Yeah.
When that will happen to you in your projections?
I don't know. So PKR is a very successful 3D poker site over in Europe. Its big limitation is how large it is to download and how impossible it is for the big bettors to play multiple tables simultaneously, which is really bad. So
No, you can't play Backus multi-table if you switch to 2D mode. Then you can play multi-table.
right, but not in 3D.
Yeah, but not in 3D. They're not optimized for it.
So it's a beautiful game, but the real pros don't care about it, or the big bettors don't care about the 3D. What they want is gameplay, not cuteness. And I don't know when that'll come to mobile. The devices aren't ready yet.
I built a 3D poker game a few years ago, which would fit like last year iPhones perfectly.
Well done.
Yeah, I can show you later.
Thank you. That'd be great.
Awesome. Any other final parting questions? Okay, let's give Gerard a hand. Our next speaker is Margaret Wallace, CEO of Playmatics, and she'll share a little bit more about the IPs they work with, but Walking Dead is one of them.
Yes. Hi, everybody.
Walking Dead.
Yes. So where's my little thing to advance the...
Gordon's.
Is this it here?
Yep, that's it.
Hi, everybody. So I had the microphone with me the whole time, and when Jacob was talking, I was going to go, Jacob. I'm going to turn the mic on and heckle. So everybody can hear me, I take it, right? So welcome to Getting Into Bed with an IP Licensor. I cannot claim credit for that title. YetiZen came up with it. I put it up on my blog to advertise this talk, and I have to admit I got a lot of clicks, and I think it has to do with the SEO optimized title there. And you see the. So yes, so that's me. Some of the letters are getting cut off, but it doesn't really
We'll get that fixed right now.
matter. although it's on video, so you might want to. So I grabbed some slides from previous presentations, and I made some, so forgive me if it's all very self-aggrandizing here, but that's me. I'm Margaret Wallace. I'm CEO and co-founder of a company called Playmatics. And here's the logo. It's very blurry for all of you to see. I made this presentation myself. And we're headquartered in New York City, and I am the lone person out in San Francisco. In New York City, we're about 10 people. And in San Francisco, it's just me for now. I found that I was commuting every month to San Francisco for meetings, and so the excuse I give for being in the Bay Area is because of all the meetings, but it's just because the weather is better and it's more fun.
No, you didn't.
Yes, I know, exactly. And Playmatics, just really quickly, I'm going to talk a little bit about what we do and then get more into the brands and how we work with different kinds of brands and IP. But we've been around since 2009, and we really focus on, obviously, entertainment, education, healthcare. We just were accepted for our first neurogaming project. We're going to be working on an NIH funded grant with these neuroscientists around something super cool. And then, for better or for worse, we've been doing a lot of work inside of gamification. And my co-founder is Luke Fortuno. He's based in New York City, and he's probably best known as having been the original designer of Diner Dash. And we do a lot of public speaking, and we also are affiliated with a lot of great organizations, including YetiZen, and then also in New York City,
What do you do with those guys, the YetiZen guys?
Oh, YetiZen. We are, well, I'm a mentor for YetiZen, and I speak a lot every chance I get, and I love meeting the new people, the new class that comes in. And back in, I think October, we were named as institutional partners for the IFP Made in New York Media Center. And so this is a Mayor Bloomberg sponsored initiative. It's very unusual for New York City to create a startup space. It's devoted to gaming and so-called transmedia storytelling. And so if anybody's in New York City, it's an open space and has worked a 100-person theater, so definitely please feel free to stop by. It's in Dumbo, Brooklyn, and that will be the site of our new office in October. And since the very beginning of my career, I've been working a lot with brands, both original and licensed IP. And these are some of the partners that Playmatics has worked with since we've been around in business. And as you can see, you know, there are even some that are missing, but it ranges from public institutions to consumer video sites like Smosh.com to, I've left some of the Disneys off. We've worked with the Epcot Center, and we've worked with the BBC and the American Red Cross, and I consider all these working with IP and brands one way or another.
What did you do with the Federal Reserve?
So the Federal Reserve Bank,
If she tells you, she'll have to kill you.
they were investigating doing a game to teach people about how the economy works and how money gets made and all this.
They can figure it out. Say
How to pay your taxes?
Yeah.
Tell you how to figure it out.
So,
That didn't have anything to do with 2007 when
well, I'm sure it was the aftermath. It was right around the time of Occupy Wall Street. So we would go to the Federal Reserve headquarters on Liberty Street, and the people we were hanging out with were like staring at the Occupy Wall Street people, very fascinated by it. And the Federal Reserve has these bomb-proof curtains, so they were like looking through the bomb-proof curtains, very interested. But it was through our work with AMC Television where we did a couple projects with Walking Dead, IP, just an interactive comic. And here's another one we did with Breaking Bad, and this one won an award, Cable Fax Award. These are really small games. These are where we were just basically brought on as contractors. So it was one example of ways we work with licensors. And then we worked with The Walking Dead. This, when it was released, was in the top Android charts for several weeks in a row. Of course, we didn't find this out until like a year after the game launched. Nobody bothered to really tell us. That's a whole other thing I'm going to be talking about in a second, about what it's like to work with brands. But because of that work, we were able to build our own platform for quickly iterating on interactive comics and e-comic games. We're calling it PlayComix. and it's cross-platform, and these are just some of the features, but it was through our work with AMC Television and our learnings around how to do episodic content and content that kind of has like a comic book component that gave us a launching pad for building our own internal technology and resources. And I know that's something that all of us who are in startups have had to do one way or another, is just build on expertise using opportunities like this that come your way. And so at Playmatics, the way we work with brands, we work either as a licensor, so I'll explain what that is in a second really quickly. We work as content partners, we work in the capacity as brand representatives, in the capacity of original IP, and then working with different brand holders around their strategy. And so as a licensor, for example, recently we worked with the Untouchables brand, and we were essentially sub-licensors, but that's how we do that. As a content partner, it might be on the low end, a work-for-hire project, or hopefully something more entrepreneurial where we're co-developing with a partner. And original IP, that's either us creating our own brands and working to have that distributed, so that's sort of like indie publishing. But also, we have large brand holders come to us and say, hey, there's this famous person, or maybe not so famous person, who has new IP that's coming out. It's going to be an animated series. Can you handle the gaming part of it? And so we really get to work at the ground level and some pretty cool top secret stuff. Very high risk, high reward. Some of it, a lot of it never comes to fruition because when you're at this level, it can be very speculative, but that's another way in which we work with brands. And as a representative of brands, and as a brand rep, that means, so for a while I was actually representing the Walking Dead license, so that was a whole other capacity where I had to take the license and look for developers and publishers to publish games for Xbox and whatever, Facebook and whatever other opportunities are out there. And then as a brand strategist, I did that a lot with A&E Television Networks, where they had a bunch of brands like Pawn Stars and stuff like that, Duck Dynasty and Paranormal State, and like, what do you do with those? And so that's kind of the range of experience that I'm bringing to the table today when I speak with all of you right now about brands. And so I just thought it might be useful to kind of put together some sort of truths and observations that I've kind of collected over the years of working in all these various capacities. They're in no particular order. But first of all, it's fun and rewarding to work with high-profile IP. There's something really cool and exciting about for example, I'm not saying we were working with Neil Gaiman, but like somebody of that caliber who's doing something really fantastic, and you get to see their scripts ahead of time, and you get to kind of be on the creative ground floor. Or in the case of The Walking Dead or The Breaking Bad, we got to work with actual writers from the shows to create the scripts, and it's awesome. And in fact, I was listening to the Breaking Bad Insider podcast, and the guy we worked with, Gordon, was on the podcast and even mentioned the games he did with us, even just the other day. And these games are little tiny things, but just got a lot of attention. But it's also just as hard to make your own IP as branded IP. So I don't think the effort, if you're doing what you're doing the right way, is any easier working with a great brand than it is creating your own IP. So you really have to weigh the pluses and minuses in terms of whether it's worth it to work with a brand or not. And there's just as much variability in the upside, and I'll go into that a little bit later, but the old adage, and there's a reason why a lot of people in gaming have a really unfriendly attitude sometimes towards brands and working with licensors, is it's just a dog-eat-dog world. The bottom line, the upside just isn't as great. Sometimes working with licensors can really stink sometimes. And so why not just put all of that effort and focus into making your own IP where you don't have to worry about licensors and territories and all of that. So definitely something to consider. I would say in terms of working with brands and licensors, I mean, it's a cliche, like relationships are key, but it's so true when you're working with these licensing partnerships, because, for example, I happen to know of a really high-profile gaming company that has done episodic content, really successful. They work with a brand, I can't say who it is. And it was like kind of easy peasy for them. They were doing really well. And now they have a new piece of content with another brand licensor coming out, and they're late, and they're having all these troubles, and you would think, given all they learned with all their early success with this other brand property, it would just transfer to this new project. But that doesn't happen because, well, it turns out their licensors are crazy, and they're having them change, oh, make all the blues pinks, and make all the greens, plaid, or just crazy requests that they could have maybe been better at anticipating and kind of, not getting into this situation, but it can happen. If it happened to them, it can happen to any of us. There are more licensing deals out there than ever. In fact, I'm really surprised at how little we exploit available licenses when we think about all of the opportunities there are to get licenses. Dead licenses and living licenses, so dead licenses like strawberry shortcake, just as one off the top of my head, that's a dead license. Or another one that I would have tried to get a hold of, which was Tales from the Crypt. I was like, resurrect Tales from the Crypt, that would be brilliant. And but even living licenses, obviously not Game of Thrones, but stuff that's around, you can sometimes get that for little or no money down. You can sometimes say to a licensor, hey, I don't want to give you a single dime for your tired old strawberry shortcake license, but I'll give you 5 or 10% royalties in the back end. And in the old days, like 2 or 3 years ago, that was a much harder deal to make. These days, those deals are really out there. If you look, and I think there's a reason that we don't take advantage of a lot of these brand opportunities, and it's because it takes a long time to find a decision maker sometimes when you're getting IP or brands. And it also takes a long time to do these deals. Sometimes you can do them in a week or two, sometimes it takes a year. And it's just really variable, and depending on who you're working with, they can be really annoying and stupid. You can have somebody really waste your time, and they really have no decision-making power whatsoever. And when I was working as representing brands, where I spent 10 months working for the BBC last year, a lot with their Doctor Who game property, and 9 times out of 10, licensors, especially these days, especially in light of the Zynga IPO not going so great and changes going in social gaming, they're a lot more risk adverse these days. And so licensors 9 times out of 10, all things being equal, will try to find a partner who can take on most of the risk and cost for development. And there are certainly exceptions to that rule, and there are a lot of licensors who will do co-development deals or who will pay for 100% of development outright. But right now, the climate is very risk adverse, and you see even companies like Disney moving more and more towards licensing models. And brand recognition, I think this was said previously by the previous speaker, may help in user acquisition, especially on mobile, but it only goes so far if the gameplay just doesn't match the user expectations. And I've noticed another trend. We're doing a lot more work in, I mentioned neurogaming, but also serious games these days. There's a lot of opportunity, surprisingly. I've never really been that interested in serious games, but it pays the bills. And I'm noticing a lot more popular brands being integrated with educational games more than ever. And I think that trend is only going to increase, even with new IP. I wouldn't be surprised if there was an educational game based on the Hunger Games, just for example. And then stuff like making sure that you have your credits or metrics, something I referenced earlier, like how did I know that Walking Dead game, because you didn't control the distribution in that case. How did I know that it was downloading, millions of times in the Android store? We really didn't know. But if you kind of have some kind of mechanism, or if you negotiate that up front to share metrics, reporting, if you negotiate up front distribution, exclusivity, all that stuff is on the table, depending on how much leverage you have. And marketing efforts, a lot of time each party will say, oh, my marketing is great, and a lot of time media companies will promise marketing commitments, kind of saying, hey, this will help And you really have to evaluate whether that pays off in terms of user acquisition. Often it doesn't. And it's the same thing with, on the flip side, if you are working with a piece of IP, I've been on both sides of the table the past year. I've seen people who are developers who supposedly know so much about how to market a game, and they've had all this experience, and they just don't know the audience or don't know how to tap into the fan base for this branded IP, and so their promises aren't really paying off either. And I would say, above all, if you do ever do any kind of licensing deals or you're doing some kind of co-development, just make sure that you try to avoid having to get one-off approvals like on distribution or anything territory, art approvals, because it can just slow things down. You know, we had that one issue with Paramount. We were working with them. We had to get like everything approved if we wanted to take it to a new channel. And as a result, the game's just kind of festering because it's so difficult to work with Paramount to get their approvals. It's just not worth my time. And, you know, I don't really care. And then just because you get approvals doesn't mean they will stick to their word. Paramount sent us, you know, Untouchables discs full of music and voiceovers and Robert De Niro and all this great stuff, and they said, go for it, you have all the rights, just use it in the game, it's no problem. And then we send them a build to approve, and they said, what are you talking about? There's no way you can use any of that audio. Who said you could do that? And I'm like, here it is in writing, we said we could. And they're like, well, we were wrong, we can't use it. And just 2 weeks ago, a good friend of mine had all of these approvals and licensing rights to his IP. She gets all this approval on art and box art, it's a retail product. And then the head of this department at this media company decided she didn't want the CD to go out. So my friend had to cancel like 50,000 orders to Walmart. I mean, I think she solved it, but it can have real consequences if you don't have a good relationship with whatever licensing partner you have. And then just know that depending on the brand, whether you're licensing or you're co-developing or you're just work for hire, just know that somewhere in that mix, chances are the so-called talent is going to have to get a cut of all of your revenues or the gross revenues for the project. That can be up to 15 or 20% off the table. So that can be very prohibitive. And, you know, you also have to be aware that there might be some licensors like cable channels that don't have all the rights to all of their IP, so they might have rights to the TV show, but not the comic book. And if you have a situation like that, is that going to cause confusion in the marketplace? Is that going to cause problems? And, you know, is it really worth it to work on that particular IP? And then finally, I said that I'm surprised that more people don't work with brands, but then again, maybe not. And even though there are a lot of derivative products out there, I mean, hidden object games galore with, you know, all these different IP brands, not to slam hidden object games or anything like that, but there is a lot of experimentation I see happening with brands. We're doing a project right now with Red Bull that is going to be very kind of cool and hopefully a little cutting edge, and, you know, uses a lot of extreme sports type stuff. And so there are opportunities to kind of innovate. And there are also a potential to focus on niche brands as well as more mainstream brands. And that's it. That's my presentation. So thank you.
Questions for Margaret? Ian?
It just went out of my head. Now, do you?
All right.
I have two
It was a
questions.
club beat
Actually,
downstairs. You're
the-
like dancing.
It's about The Walking Dead.
It's not about the Walking Dead. Go ahead, Chris. Go first.
When you were talking about the situation where, let's just say Paramount said, yeah, you know, go for it. And then they said, no, don't go for it. And I was wondering, were you exaggerating when you said, no, look, we have this in writing. And then they just said, well, no, you don't. Is that really the way it was? I mean, if you have it in writing at that point, don't you kind of have them over a barrel?
No.
I mean, what happens, what's the next step in that process?
So I showed them the emails, but it wasn't contractually that we had the rights. We just had emails saying we had the rights. And
Okay, well, that's different then.
yeah.
An informal email could always be, oh, we were drunk. But I mean,
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. But even in the case of my friend who did have it in writing with this example with the retail product, You know, you just get one whim of one SVP sitting in New York who is, you know, doesn't even really, you know, works 3 hours a day. And sure, they can really make your life miserable, even though they have it in writing. In my case at Paramount, what I did is I forced them to pay for the cost to do the revisions as a result.
Hi, Chief of Film from YetiZen.
Hi, nice to meet you.
No, I have a serious question though. I've done a lot of license work as well, Battlestar Galactica, Neil Gaiman, which we'll talk later. But what are, let's say, the top 3 important things to negotiate when you're talking to licensors? Would be distribution, like whether you own the users or if they do, the revenue share, like what's the top important parts to really nail down that's important to you as Playmatics? And that's going to be different from every developer, maybe even every project, I don't know. But what do you consider?
So if I'm just doing a licensing deal where I'm paying $5,000 or $10,000 for the rights to distribution rights, or if that's the way a traditional licensing deal, then yeah, I mean, I want to make sure that I have as much distribution as I can, on as many platforms as I can, and I'm protecting the territories as much as I can. But oftentimes that's very limited. Obviously, rev share is important, but it's more I think fundamentally like what happens, you know, thinking of contingency plans, like what happens if, you know, you don't approve the art that I have for this game. What is the process for that? I think the devil is really in the detail. With my friend who had that other situation with the retail products, what they ultimately wanted was more money. And so she was able to negotiate out of it, but it was a real kind of jerky maneuver.
So you actually have a question. You mentioned in the presentation that the marketing promise by the brand doesn't always necessarily translate to converted users within your own games. Why do you think that is? And is there something that, you know, developers should watch out for in terms of the type of, you know, brand reach those brands have that could make that a very different scenario?
It really depends on, like, most of my experience in that regard was, well, my most recent experience was working with, like, media companies. And so a lot of it is, there's just, it doesn't really close the loop. There's something missing. In one case, it's because a successful cable show, if you're lucky, has 3 million viewers, right? That's like considered a raging success. So if you imagine you show a 15-second commercial that may or may not be targeted to the right people who are going to be playing games in general anyway, and then X% of those will even bother to remember the URL or whatever prompts or whatever marketing is happening on the website to go check out a game or on a mobile site. It's just, the ecosystem really isn't tight. Now, I've seen exceptions to that. You know, when I was working with Dr. Gustav at BBC, we were able to release virtual goods in the game at the same time as, like, pretty much close to the same time that the shows were airing. And there were on-air advertising. There was on-air advertising. But then you have to make sure the game, you know, appeals to the correct audience, and just so many factors in play.
So I was talking to a game development studio that used to work with licenses, and they said that they estimate for any show that, or any IP that has Facebook fans of over like a million fans, that they imagine a 1% conversion for any marketing the brand does for them on the Facebook page. Does those numbers sound right? Has it been your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's changed, but Facebook, as you probably all know, a Facebook page can generate a lot of qualified traffic to a piece of content. It doesn't always mean that they convert, obviously, but it's definitely, you can get a lot of leads.
I
finally remember my question. On a per project basis, about how much money or time do you have to kind of budget for legal contractual back and forth, and how much does that eat into your overall margins? And how do you plan for that?
I mean, honestly, you know, lawyers are interesting. I think you can get
just over contracts.
I know lawyers. I think you can probably get away with getting a pretty good licensing deal, you know, negotiate it, or at least get a nice template for a couple $1,000s. And if you build enough experience and collect contracts. I think that's probably a good amount, like $5,000.
Ian?
Are you seeing a lot of activity in second screen kind of projects, especially synchronized? I saw Breaking Bad has been advertising. I have to admit I haven't yet done it because we tape delay, but.
So interesting, right? I tried to get Breaking Bad story sync to watch it with the story, and for the life of me, I couldn't find it in the App Store, and I didn't want to use it on my laptop because I didn't want it to glare while I was watching the show, which I think is interesting. Second screen is still very, very hot right now. It's kind of waning in some circles with some of the media companies. Everyone is paying a lot of lip service to second screen, but at the same time, nobody's really figured out how to make it. This is the problem going on with all digital media. Like, everybody knows they need to be in this space, but a lot of people, especially these like old media companies, these brand holders, don't know how to make money from what they're doing. So even when they have like some kind of groundswell of community activity, they don't necessarily figure it out. I don't know how the Breaking Bad second screen is going, but I would love to check it out myself.
Just to add a little note, I did meet at Casual Connect a VP, a self-described VP of digital second screen technology, efforts or whatever. This was his business unit, and I swear in 5 minutes, he hadn't thought through conflicts against commercials. He hadn't thought through platforms. There were so many things that just seemed really basic from an understanding point of view.
Yeah.
Okay, question in the back.
So even though you might get written approval to come out with a product for various licensing, then still they don't agree, it sounds like you're kind of forced to subject terms at any point. Say that it's for 15%. Now they want 30%, or your out-of-pocket costs and possibly legal battles to get that initial terms of agreement. Is that the case out here? Or?
I mean, the bottom line is if they want to mess with you, they can mess with you unless you're willing to really take them on. And I've taken on some larger companies before when I had VC money and a VC-funded lawyer.
And how long do these battles take generally?
I think these are things you can work out in a couple weeks generally. Like if the person is returning your phone calls or they didn't get fired and they're replaced by a new VP who is relearning the old things from somebody's email. It's very, I don't want to make pretend this happens all the time or a lot, but it definitely happens.
So generally budget to expect them wanting twice as much as what they originally allowed.
Well, just try to have a good direct relationship with the source of who owns the IP as much as you can, and not go through some middle manager. You can help it. Why are you laughing? Because you know.
No, I'm laughing because I'm thinking, is there an equivalent of offended? Is there a ratings, an online rating service that we can post anonymous stories about license?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
It's what I've wanted to do for a while, actually. That's why he's laughing and mentioning it.
So I think that might be the last question here, but
I have a question. You mentioned being a brand rep. In IP games, they really have they market well, they sell well, they get really good reach, but a lot of them don't have long-term playability and gameplay. So I'm kind of curious, as the brand rep side of things, how much control did you have with stuff, and what kind of budgets do they give you to work with? Or is it, like, it sounds like that was from the brand rep side of things, though.
Yeah, so what we're seeing when we see bad gameplay or bad experiences, digital experiences that accompany a brand, there are often a few things going on. I mean, my God, there are a lot of things going on. One is it's just being licensed out to somebody who can afford to get the license, and they're just slapping together some game mechanic, some poker game or hidden object game is just slapped with the IP, and it's and the way the brand is translated doesn't carry over at all. I know that a couple years ago there was a Jersey Shore Facebook game that was just horrendous, but I remember seeing people from MTV, no offense, if anyone's from MTV here, saying, our Jersey Shore game, it's doing really well, and then of course, completely fell off the cliff because people were like, okay,
Didn't require a studio to make that one happen.
They probably acquired a studio. I mean, it wasn't OMG Pop, or I don't know who it was, but so that's one reason. Another reason is sometimes you're dealing with a design by committee, so it's such a high-profile brand. You know, on one hand, you're doing a lot of code. If you're doing co-development with the brand holder, you really want that close relationship. But then sometimes it ends up being a design by committee, and then you find out, like you're halfway through development, and then you find out the main character, because of some licensing issues with the actor, you can't show the main character in 85% of your game, because if you do, then you have to pay. I know, for example, with Doctor Who, if everybody knows that IP, it's about a 50-year-old IP. It's one of the oldest science fiction pieces out there, and the Daleks, one of the monsters of the series, the BBC did not own the rights to the Daleks. That belonged to the original artist from the 1960s who came up with the idea for the Daleks. He actually just died a few months ago. He was like a pop artist. So we had a hard time originally getting permission to use the Daleks because it was just tied up with all these licensing issues.
Yeah, and it's kind of a continuation of the point you just made. I was wondering, this is a really broad strokes question, but in general, have you noticed any kind of tendency or aversion of the people you're coming to for the licensing agreement with how have they been about, like, if you want to approach it with a new type of gameplay, have they been really more comfortable with, yeah, you know, let's just take a template gameplay that's already out there that we understand, you know, hidden object or basic, you know, adventure type games? Or have you noticed a tendency for them to be open to, you know, here's an entirely new kind of mechanic or gameplay that we want to apply to this license? Is there anything you can say about resistance or not to that kind of innovation?
Actually, maybe even a broader question. What kind of constraints, if any, do most of these brand guys give you?
Well, I hate to be like nostalgic because I'm really anti-nostalgia. But back in the .com era, years ago, like eons ago, it was like free reign awesomeness, and yeah, we blew millions and billions of dollars, but you know, you could like spend $500,000 on a game, and you did have free reign to be innovative. Now it's super conservative, and you know, people look at Candy Crush, which is don't get me wrong, Candy Crush does so many great things right, great production values, but to them, like, that's an innovative game. And it is an innovative game. They've innovated along the lines of social, along the lines of monetization, but along the lines of gameplay, we pretty much know what the Candy Crush saga delivers, right? But, so there's a real reticence to doing anything innovative.
So that question comes up typically right off the bat, that we want this to be something that's already a well-beaten path? Or
generally, yes. Which we know in high-risk, high-reward IP is often not the way to make greatness. It's just the way to make mediocrity. But
awesome.
Anyway, thanks everybody.
Thanks everybody. So we had Brian come speak to the Accelerator company, so that presentation was up for a short bit. We're not talking about that today. We are talking about IPs, and you can watch whatever this is, go into their email, check out their passwords, you can go in later, pull out the presentation. So we'll get started in a few minutes. Hey, just a quick show of hands. Who's actually working with IPs right now? Two? The rest of you?
I think some of the people left that were...
Yeah? Come on, you guys are working with IPs.
Yeah.
Yeah? Yeah. You just didn't want to share.
Yeah.
What was that? Huh? I noticed. I was the one who said funding options? Didn't we agree on a different topic? Okay, and then Bud, our wonderful Twitterer over here, has been tweeting. So any insights from today that you might have missed? Watch the YetiZen Twitter stream. Bud's been tweeting quite intently. I've been retweeting and tweeting some of my own stuff.
And they mentioned Great Damian.
Not tweeting. Oh, and all the videos from our events, for basically the last 3 years of us doing events, they are up on Game Startup TV on YouTube. So check it out. Good way to see how the game industry's evolved, learn things beyond the vaporware, which is what we focus on here at YetiZen. At this point, I have Japheth go up and dance on stage. Usually.
Yeah. Kenny, please.
Yeah, Kenny, please. Hey, Japheth. Go up.
You tell jokes.
Your jokes are horrible. Why don't you just dance?
Then my dancing's even worse.
He mugs the joke.
I know, but it's funnier.
It's good.
Sorry about that, you guys.
So the presentation's in. You start talking and we'll load that up.
Let's go.
Yeah, there we go.
Why is that happening?
Should be fine now.
Hello, hello? Yeah. Hello, hello?
Hey everyone, my name is Brian Backus, and I've done a number of startups. I'm working on a new one now. The current one I'm working on does not involve licensing for some of the reasons that you've already heard this evening, and that I will be sharing with you as well. There are a lot of wonderful advantages to it, and I think Margaret made some just great points about how fun it can be and how much reach it can give you and how much exposure. But I really thought what I would try to do is just go through a couple of the experiences that I've had, and also to show you the practical notion of what it means to work with a licensor, what kind of back and forth can occur. So I brought some examples of that as well. And I'm sorry about the thump. I think we should like to see if we can have fun. Okay. So here's, none of this is going to be completely new to you, but there are a few things when I was just doing a little research that I thought were of interest here. And the most striking was not just that 24 of the top 25 grossing games are game publishers and developers, but 50% of all app revenue is shared by just 25 publishers. That's really significant for anybody that's trying to make a break into the market, and it's a good reason to talk to licensors for some of the reasons you'll see. Also, just a kind of a scary stat, that 10% of all App Store revenue comes from just 7 apps on the iPhone and just 4 in Google Play. 10% of all the revenue. So there's a few folks who are raking it in. The big pros, can you, is there a way to get? Yeah. Thanks. Big pros, of course, as has been mentioned before, discoverability. It really does help. It's amazing. We had some almost accidental apps on Android, and they would get regular hits over and over and over again with licensors like Disney products, where people just were searching on Dora. They just were, and sorry, that's Nickelodeon, but like Disney Princess, they just were searching on that. So the other big thing besides memorability is the assets are crazy and fabulous. And art is not one of our greatest expenses as game developers necessarily. However, the access to rich video and just brilliant talent when you do work with an asset library is huge and can be worth it. And there are certain circumstances where it absolutely is worth it. And I think that's one of the things you really want to think about is how much time and expense will you save by access to rich video. So for example, if you're going to do, if there's a lot of video in your application, and that's part of the license that you're to acquire, then it can be worth it. A lot of cons. many already discussed. Cost, the approval process, I'm just going to stand over here. Conflicting goals, they don't necessarily have the same goals that you do. Your own brand subordination. A lot of the contracts are really very complex around ownership. Who actually especially if you have a novel technology, you often have to be really, really careful that they're going to make a land grab for your technology in the contract. And so that might be a little buried, and you have to really, so I think what Margaret is saying is absolutely right. If you get good at contracts yourself, your expense can go way down, but that very first or second contract, you're going to want some professional help with. So if you don't have a business development person who's actively working on that, you probably do want some real help on that first one. And it's a good time to pull some favors. That's a great moment. And then you get a template, and then you really have an understanding of how to structure these things. So this is just a little funky. And the other thing that's I think can be a real drag on your business is the tracking and reporting. You're giving a percent of revenue. That's just the nature of the deal. And they want to know exactly when, if you've paid your advance, when it's paid off, and they want to know how much revenue you've made in any given period. And that's, when you're a tiny little team, that tracking can be a burden. So a little bit of the how. So how does it actually work? Most of the big IP owners do have licensing departments. So in terms of shortening your time to get to the right person, if it's a big company, they will have a licensing department. No to ask for that, and just go right to the licensing department. And then you'll make your pitch, and either it'll work or it won't. So they will often claim to have standard royalty rates, and it is often the case with a Disney. They will have a standard rate, and you kind of can pay it or not. For other folks, they're so much more flexible. So you don't have to take the standard rate at face value.
What's typical? What's typical when they place?
Well, I'd be interested in your information is probably more. It really does depend. I mean, if there is a personality, an individual talent who is taking a cut off the top, you're going to be paid so much higher than if it's a dead brand. But like Disney might expect, I'm going to give this as a range because it's actually not disclosable when you sign these things. But I would think 10 to 20%. Does that sound about right, Margaret? Yeah. Roughly. So this is coming off of course, what you're really doing is a game as merchandise from their perspective. So this is part of their merchandising business. And the merchandising business has a very long history. And essentially the structure historically has always been that you do some kind of an estimate of how much that you think you're going to sell. And you say, and that makes you look attractive. So the little game, and it is a poker game, is you should work with us to do this game because we're so good, we're going to be able to sell 1 million copies. And then they're going to say, okay, we'll prove it by paying this advance. And you're going to say, well, I'm not going to, I can guarantee only so much. So there's a song and a dance around how much of an advance you're going to be paying against future royalties. And that's one of the benefits of doing something that's a little bit non-standard is you have a very credible argument that you have absolutely no idea how big the market is and that you're going to take a mutual risk with the brand owner. And there's very little cost to them because there's no one else who's going to be offering them any money for that. So that's really a scenario where you can even get somebody to loan you a brand. And then finally, they should have, once you do secure a license, you will get a dedicated resource. And so you should have a turn-to person. And there it is, absolutely. If you have bad juju with that person, don't do the license. Your life will be hell. If you have an amazing, amazing relationship and a lot of mutual respect, it's so fun. It's a thing of beauty. You're actually really learning from each other because they bring a lot of value to the table. They really do know their brand. They know what their customers like about their brand. They know what you should emphasize. And they may have really great creative ideas themselves. That's an unusual bird, but when you do it, then it's actually a lot more fun to work with existing IP because it has this big installed base. It's going to be so discoverable immediately, and it's going to be beautiful because you have all this gorgeous art to work with. Sorry. I wanted to just use an example. There's a company that I'm currently consulting with that is using video assets, and this is a great context in which to talk about when it's really worth a license. If you're using a lot of rich video is very expensive to produce. And if there is somebody who has a big library of video built up over years, that is an asset which you would never be able to replicate. And if you can license it at a royalty rate, it would be a similar thing with a rich audio library, obviously. Just anything where it's core to whatever your concept is. A lot of beautiful 3D environments would be another example. Just really richly made, really richly textured. Then you could think, okay, this is really worth it. The company that I was doing before this one was a company called Kidlandia, and we work with a lot of licensors. I find it funny. Neil Gaiman keeps coming up. Yes, and we work with Neil Gaiman. I'm going to show you an example of the license that we did with a version of the first using our original IP. So that's what this is. This is the original character IP that was owned by Kidlandia, where we developed these fantasy worlds. So this is just a little fantasy map. Everything is sort of drag and drop, and it's a cute little game for kids based on IP that we had. What was useful about having this IP ourselves was we could take it to the big media companies and say, imagine this with your brand. And since this didn't exist yet at that time, this is now 4 years ago, it was pretty new. There was really no competition for it, and so they were willing to lend us their brands effectively. Now that said, if we didn't start paying royalties in a defined period of time, meaning 18 months to 2 years, at a significant level, it was over. So that's, but they were willing to take that risk. And that was kind of a shared risk. Went to one of the first companies I talked to was Disney. I'd been a producer at Disney. And we had a conversation, and they were like, this is great, let's try it. And so we agreed, and it's much more complicated than that, of course. The whole contract process was pretty deep and constricted. But one of the versions that we did was for cars. And so I'm going to show you how this started. How do you translate a brand like Cars into your game environment that it feels true to the brand, but also serves the needs of your mechanics? So we do maps, obviously. So that was a map-based item. This is really the only reference art we had that was of use to us, besides the front-on imagery. So here is Radiator Springs, and here's a map that they had in their reference art. And over here is something that they were building a car. There was a Cars MMO that was being built. And this was reference art from the Cars MMO. So, okay, here are two pieces of art. We did a sketch that made sense for us. We had a few things that were absolutely essential. One is we had to have the capacity to personalize at least 20 fields. We also needed to be able to place at least 30 objects that were drag and drop objects. And we wanted it to look like a map because especially in this case, in the case of Cars, and in many of these cases, it had to also be printable. So we had to be able to create a set of assets that could be composited in high resolution on the server side, and then printed out on any of a variety of substrates, from small placemats to very large blankets. It's a very high resolution image. We needed to have access to assets of very high resolution for that reason. So this is the first sketch that we did, and this was something we did. You can see name Carsland, which really means that, well, maybe this is Bob Carsland. A lot didn't fly with this. There was an attempt to create this idea of a little nameable town, and we needed to have a story because we wanted to put the child's story in there. So we got a lot of commentary back on that. And eventually we got to this. So this was sort of the next level where there was a lot that they had said, okay, well, you definitely want a Radiator Springs, that's fine. It's fine to have a river. Yes, the basic landscape, the basic structure is fine. Yes, the racetrack is fine. This is already, by the way, like 3 or 4 back and forths. So granted, Disney's more complicated than a lot of companies when you're doing IP with them. But there's a lot of time associated with working with IP that you have to build into the process, which is why I'm saying that when there's media involved, that's a lot, would require incredible resources on your own part. That's when it's often worth the trouble. So I just thought this would be fun for you to see. This is just their commentary. So it's kind of weird, random stuff. So like, are these names from the movies? If not, remove. What's funny about that is they don't know. And then this was like, our artist just stupidly left these logos on there. I don't know why, but like, yes, remove those. Okay, that's easy to do, right? So it almost would be worth planting a few of these things just that you knew were super easy. You could please them and remove these. Are these from the movie? No. Okay, delete. So you can see, in this case, we were fairly far along. We'd already gotten basic approval of the design. So the comments are now getting pretty small, but this is probably like round 7 at this point. And this is the finished product. So one of the tricks I think that's important to share with you here is you'll note the degree of detail in this versus this. So what you should see here is that we were not spending the time yet. We needed to know that the framework was rock solid before we were going to go in and do the detailed texturing. It really brings it to life. It really makes it something that is delicious and delightful. I'll just show you a couple more examples. Here's Disney Princess, same concept, just skinned it with Princess. Slightly different design concept what we did with Toy Story. Here again, another map, but this is Dora, SpongeBob, and yes, even VeggieTales. Yeah. I don't think there's anything, well, just in terms of discoverability, this was a banner ad we had for one of our Marvel products. Of course, that's just going to stand out more because they know it and understand it. So it does help with discoverability. We were working with Legos, this product never came out, but you can just see, here they already had an asset in their library that would have been very easily adapted to, and this was a pitch for Star Wars, and we had various map versions, and we did not get Star Wars. And the reason we didn't get Star Wars is just one of those things that you run into. They would tell us they loved us, and then they just said, George needs a $50,000 check. Sorry, we're really not going to talk to you until you can bring us a $50,000 check. So, these companies all have their own parameters. So that's really it. And if you guys have any questions, let me know.
Questions?
Can you talk about, or maybe just give a warning around when you approach a licensor and they've got great content and branding, but you're going in with as a digital entity, the assumption that their assets, while they're great, may not be usable within what you want to build. If you run, they may have video, but it's on old cellulose or whatever, so you come back and you don't realize it until after you run into it.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Yes, absolutely, but much more with the smaller brands. So really, Disney, 70% of their revenue is now merchandise. And so their business is to have an incredibly well-documented, well-developed library of assets. And they will have just about everything that you could need or want. That said, you do end up having to adapt your product to their available assets. And otherwise, you're going to end up doing a lot of work, right? Because you're going to build it yourself. We created that Cars map from scratch because it didn't exist. So that was a lot of work, and they had to approve it. In terms of just conversion, my experience, and I don't know, Margaret, you may have a different one, is we did swallow the costs. If there was an actual just format conversion, that was something that we would often pay for, but we would be able to back it out of future royalties if they had access to it. You can work that all out. That's just a negotiation. Yeah.
Yeah, so I see kind of two major categories why you work with a licensor. One is you want more IP for your games that you're creating. Another is a licensor just wants to do a brand extension, a brand reach. And I think you did work on some of those projects, like wasn't Mafia Wars one of those types?
Yeah.
So can you talk about the difference between working with licensors on those two different avenues? One where you're doing your own creation, your own game, that you're using their IP, and one where you're just doing something for them to give them an extension or a reach for their brand?
Yeah, so I think in the second case is where you do run into the danger of them overcommitting their marketing, over-promising marketing. At some level, when you're a small startup, you really do have to stay true to your core value proposition. And if you don't, then you need to get paid up front, because they can promise the wazoo out of the marketing, and it probably just will never be delivered. So that's along the Mafia Wars dimension, where we got so excited about their promise for a marketing commitment, but the reality was nobody had any idea what kind of conversion there would be. And as it turned out, there was crap. There was a lot of eyeballs, but there was crappy conversion. Not surprising. These guys aren't there to buy posters, so it's sort of this situation. So in the other case, where you have a core product that is already desirable, and you're skinning it, there was enormous leverage for us in that, because we were able to then go, in terms of the physical product, go to Walmart and say, hey Walmart, we have this now for every brand that you already sell. And they would go, great, let's take it. Walgreens took it. Toys R Us took it. And I think it was just our own IP, they would not have taken it. At least not as quickly, and we would have had to grow a lot further organically. That might have been a better thing in the long run. I'm not sure. But in any case, if our goal was to get all this exposure that major retail had to offer, then going with licenses was essential. I just wanted to show this one because this was another sort of bizarre case in terms of the different varieties. This is our concept. This is Pottery Barn's artist. And this actually was less of a game and more just of a personalization play. And they merchandised the crap out of it. This is from their catalog, which they sent out to 40 million American households. And this was our most successful physical product that we ever did. And we got the least revenue for it. So they did all the work and they got all the money, is really what it boiled down to. And they leveraged the platform that we had and took advantage of the fact that this little startup was better at technology than they were. But what they were brilliant at was merchandising and design, and they were able to capture the lion's share of that. I don't think we could have done any better in that negotiation, even in retrospect. So there are a lot of ways to do it. I think over time, if we had stuck it out with them, we probably could have come up with a more equitable arrangement. One of the things that was wrong for us, and we had no power over this, is they priced this at an absolutely outrageous margin. This was something that was being sold, produced on demand, this physical object. So they had no inventory risk whatsoever, and yet they were still taking a 75% margin. Crazy. And we could absolutely have, over time, argued. But the thing that was promised, this is the other thing, the thing that was promised by the president of the organization, president of Pottery Barn Kids, is not what the middle managers were being compensated for. The middle managers were being compensated based on margin. So really trying to understand all these different motivations of the licensors that you're talking to can be really challenging. That's what I mean about the conflicting interests.
All right, Anar?
Let me ask this question, right? A very interesting thing is, I think a very interesting thing is happening in gaming where Home Shopping Network now has an arcade, right? So there's just open avenues where you can have the Disney characters that you, in one game, shopping in a Home Shopping Network, get those two IPs, so to speak.
I'm not sure I quite understand the question.
All right, so you licensed the characters in Disney.
Yeah,
right?
okay.
And that game goes on be it Home Shopping Network, JCPenney, whatever
Yes.
shopping sites are going to follow with this new gamified shopping environment that's being created. Do you see like two IPs for one game happening?
Well, absolutely. So if I am understanding it correctly, like if you have, you can think of it as sort of like the packaging and the envelope for the packaging.
Exactly.
So if you have the packaging and the packaging looks like Disney, then if you create the modular context where Home Shopping Network can make it feel like their own, they will. We have the identical games, you just wouldn't know it, on both Google Play and on iOS, and just nobody knew because people tend to be on a single platform, and the people who are shopping on Home Shopping Network probably aren't big QVC fans. They might be, but if you have an Android phone, you probably don't also have an iPhone.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, that makes sense. But when that starts happening, do you have to let Disney know where you're going to be porting the games? Do they have
Oh, sure, absolutely, yeah. This was one of the things that Margaret was mentioning earlier. You want to try to pre-negotiate to have the complete freedom, but at least in the case of Disney, they will have a list that you will be required to provide a list of all the places where you intend to distribute, and they will cross them off if they don't like them. But you want to make as big a claim as you possibly can, and you're going to learn a lot about them. If they tell you no on X platform, you can think, well, does that mean that they're going to be introducing a competitive product on this other platform, and is that going to screw me over? Right? So that's part of the whole kind of game with them.
Any final card questions? No? Let's give Brian a hand, guys.
Good content tonight.
All right, so for future events, watch our website and we will email you as well. We hope to see you again. Bye.
All reviews.
Talk to them.
Yeah. 3 weeks.
It was Disney Interactive.
My friend, my friend J.R. Austria. J.R. Austria.
Oh, is he here?
No, he was
Oh, no, he was here in right here.
Well,
I was at a pleasure.
oh, okay. Yeah, I know. I was trying to find just if you're gonna, so
Just as well. I don't even see all that stuff.
it looks so daunting, but right.
So you do have to show this.
So what? Oh, so the way it works, most of these are free. Some of them once a month.